Hi all, this is a short video to go over a few of the concepts in Chapter 2, which is Clear Purposes of Assessment. So in the Chappuis text, they use this graphic organizer to show where we are in their conceptual framework of 5 keys to quality classroom assessment. And we'll see this graphic organizer throughout the text. So right now we're focusing on the clear purpose key, which is foundational to all of the others. I guess you could say the clear purpose and the clear targets together are foundational to the other aspects of assessment. And so in that, underneath clear purpose, we need to think about, okay, well, what is the purpose of this assessment? Who is going to be using the information? Because that will tell us whether we want to have a formative assessment or a summative assessment or a diagnostic assessment. How will the information be used and what detail is required for this particular assessment. So there are 3 types of assessments that that the authors discuss during this chapter, and they primarily focus on formative and summative. But the 3 types are diagnostic, formative, and summative. And diagnostic tests are used like as a pre-test or for placement in specific programs, or by teachers as a pretest to see what do my students already know about a topic. And that should help us plan for instruction or should help us decide, if we can compact the curriculum for certain students. Formative assessments are ongoing assessments that provide information to the student and to the teacher about where specific students are at with regards to learning targets, and that way it could help the student know, okay, I need to work more on this particular area, and it can help the teacher also know that they might need to try teaching in a different manner that on a certain learning target if a lot of students didn't get it. Formative assessments can be either formal or informal, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And then summative assessments are assessments of what was learned throughout a unit or throughout a semester or throughout a year, and really they might provide the teacher with feedback for planning for the next year, but they're not going to help necessarily the teacher provide extra corrective feedback or learning experiences on that particular unit. So they're usually used for evaluation purposes, and that can be evaluation of the student and of the teacher as well, and even of the school. So formative versus summative, this is one of the key focuses of this chapter. In formative assessment, they say it's assessment for learning, while summative assessment is assessment of learning. So formative, again, provides information for improvement. How am I doing on this learning target? While summative assessment shows how I did. It's a judgment or an evaluation that usually is assigned a grade. Formative assessments, we are going to talk more about grading later in this course, but you don't necessarily have to grade formative assessments. They can be used really to help the child and the teacher know how the child is progressing towards a specific goal. So formative and summative assessments can be either formal or informal. However, summative assessments typically are formal rather than informal. So by formal, we mean we're not teaching in that moment, we're planning them in advance. We need to try to look at them for validity and reliability. And so that could be like an end of the unit test, a speech, a presentation, a paper that we're using a rubric to grade, that sort of thing. Informal is occurring while we're teaching, and while we still want to plan for informal assessment as well, it can be more spontaneous because you can at that moment receive direct feedback from students. They might ask you questions or, you know, give you that look that shows that they're not getting something, and then you know, okay, I need to ask a question or I need to try a different way of explaining this. We tend to use informal assessment frequently throughout the day as we're teaching, and what our authors for this text and what we're going to be working on, what our authors are really emphasizing is that we need to be more thoughtful and plan a little bit more some of our informal assessments so that we can really keep track of that and communicate progress better with our students. So some examples here are listening to what questions a student has, or listening to student conversations about an activity that they're doing, observing, asking questions as well is a good way of eliciting and gaining formative information about your students' progress. So as I mentioned, formative assessment is assessment for learning, so that we can adapt instruction on the basis of the evidence that we collect during those formative assessments, so we can make changes that are going to benefit students. And students as well should be encouraged to monitor their own learning too. And so we can put practices in place that help students do that. One of the quotes that I liked in the chapter for this topic states that, you know, one aspect of formative assessment is also helping students understand more clearly what our conception of quality is as a teacher. So on page 27, it's the author's cite Royce Sadler, who states, the indispensable conditions for improvement are that the student comes to hold a concept of quality that is roughly similar to that which is held by the teacher. So I thought that was kind of interesting aspect of formative assessment as well. Summative assessment of learning, and so we often relate that to end of grade tests, but summative assessments can be a variety of things and they don't have to be just quantitative measures. Typically, we're not using this information to improve per se, but more to assign a grade to a particular unit of study.